we always say power levels are never stagnant. Things change over time. New players show up, they put in the work, and some people might rest on their laurels a little bit, get a little complacent and not keep up with the meta. One thing we wanted to do here is take a look back and discuss exactly that with Street Fighter V as a whole. This game has gone through a lot of different seasons and a lot of different changes, and it's come a long way. But I figured it would be a good discussion just to go back and remind people how things used to be, how this game was played at one point, our perception of the game, and how those things have changed, and in some cases haven't changed, because I think some people's perception has not kept up with the realities of how this game has actually changed. Because going back to season 1, things were definitely a lot different.
They were a lot different, man. And you speak on season 1 and people's perspectives. Well, Brian, I want to make sure I bring up episode 1 of my new show called The Highlight Reel over at twitch.tv/RobTV Live every single Sunday, right? So, one of the inspirations for this topic comes from the fact that we were having a debate, man, the classic age-old debate, I know, of Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5. And look, all I gotta say is Sanford was on the show. Shout out to the OG. So you pretty much know the energy that we had going to that. It was me, Sanford, Adam, and Chris Tatarian, right? So you had the 2 Street Fighter 4 guys, the 2 Street Fighter 5 guys, pretty much, right? Of course, me and Adam and Street Fighter 5 guys. And I feel like it was quite clear, right, in my opinion, that there was a lack of keeping up with the times when it comes to the truth about Street Fighter 5 right now. So we can start off with this one right here. Crush counters. That's one of the things that was brought up as like a I guess indictment or a black mark on Street Fighter 5s in a neutral game, right? So I personally, wholeheartedly will say, I fully disagree that crush counters are at all a problem in Street Fighter 5. Now, to be honest, I would specifically say I like the existence of crush counters. I don't care whether they exist or not in neutral. Like, it doesn't really affect me. I don't really mind. But as far as the fact that you get to punish DPs even harder, if your character, especially before the scaling change, if that's the optimal thing for your character, right, I think that's cool, right? So it adds more risk to doing a DP. I even like the fact that it builds V meter and everything, but more importantly, it's just not busted, because throughout Street Fighter 5's history, what's happened is like the hurt boxes have extended on a lot of these buttons, right? Before, bro, remember they've toned it down in general, bro. You remember Karen's season 2 stand heavy kick? It was 10 frames. I thought I was mad nice, just smacking that button with no hurt box, crush countering everybody. Like, it made no sense.
Well, listen, you're talking about season 2 crush counters. You're talking to the season 2 crush counter guy himself, man. Season 2 Ballrog, that was one of the big changes going into season 3. They shaved off they tacked on like a couple extra frames of recovery. They shaved off the hitbox so it doesn't reach quite as far. And then the crush counter combo, not only did they add scaling to it so it did less damage, they completely removed the combo route in season 3. And I think that was deemed an overcorrection because they added a supplemental combo route after. He used to get the walk up crouch fierce to heavy kick upper with like no scaling on a crush counter, which back then that was the strategy. The risk reward was definitely press that button because it was pretty fast, had priority, far range, crush counter to huge damage. But yeah, they took steps to adjust that. So like I said, the range wasn't as far. The reward wasn't as much. Scaling on crush counters is definitely a factor. You mentioned DP punishes. In season 1 and 2, before the scaling was added, usually your optimal punish was from a crush counter. Now, there are some situations where like neutral jumping on a DP, like neutral jumping might still be better than the crush counter. But since then, almost everyone's optimal punish is crush counterless, right?
Yeah.
Like when you block a DP, the best punish, is if your character is so blessed to have it, is something like a medium counter hit to a heavy link, right?
Yeah, that's how Karen's is, yep.
Yeah. But like that, so for the Ballrog mains, oh no, our damage is too nerfed now because we don't have that. Pour one out for the Ballrog mains here, our low damage DP punishes.
Yeah, I don't know about that, champ.
You just neutral jump punish. The other thing to be considered now is scaling on stun, right? There's still that bonus on the first hit of DPs beyond just the crush counter. So if they're about to get stunned, you might do something that hits really heavy. Like with Ballrog, you do EX upper, because that one hit is like 180 damage. plus the damage multiplier, plus counter hit, one hit stun. It's a huge damage combo. So the way they changed it with the scaling and all that, it makes you have to think a lot more. Like when you have these moments to get these punishes, you're not just like, I always do the crush counter. It's the best for everything. You're like, oh, if I need V meter, I crush counter. It's a meter building resource. If they're close to stun, I optimize my stun by reducing number of hits and do one hit. If it's just no V meter needed and no resources, I'll do like a non-crush counter hit combo. Or if it's a character where I can get a neutral jump, I'll do that instead. You suddenly have this whole branching routes of decision making just from DP punishes. So there are a lot of changes have been added to that over the season. So it's never like one size fits all. And that there was a lot more situations I felt like in earlier season where it was kind of like one size fits all, and that's definitely not the case as the game has grown and evolved over the years.
Speaking of evolution, another thing that has changed a whole lot is just our perception of like what's even possible in footsies, right? So one of the things I would say, now you correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken,
right, I feel
like Momochi was the first person that was really showing us low forward confirms with Ken. That's how I remember it, at least. He was doing low forward super, and at that point we were like super impressed by it.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard for me to say for certain because, well, I can give you the other perception, right? I can't say for certain if Momochi was the first guy, but I can say that our perception of Ken in season 1 was dominated by jab V-skill run into back medium punch over and over, right?
Yeah.
Or we looked at Ada from Japan, who would do low forward to DP non-confirmed just because. You know? And it probably would have worked, right? So the Ken that we had, Ken was very strong out of the gate in season 1. People were just not ready to check him whatsoever, and obviously input delay and things like that.
And
yeah, there were with the Kent trilogy, right? It was like Christy, Brent, and Julio were doing work on the West Coast, all amazingly strong players.
Yeah,
but it was just we weren't ready for that explosive style of Ken. And the way he was played is nothing like what you see Ken today. Chris T kept the Ken tradition and eventually found that like hit confirm slow neutral style, which is how he played in Street Fighter 4. And you look at like Punk's Ken, one of the best Kens on the planet. Momochi, everyone else who rocks Ken. Ken is a slow character right now in Street Fighter 5 because if you do anything, you whiff a button, low forward DP knockdown, unreactable guess like throw pressure situations right after, right? Like the risk of getting out neutraled is so high that the game slows down so much because that neutral is so important, and he's not going to get the opening by random run up fierce, right? Like that's not really how it works anymore. He might do that every now and then, but mostly it's just poking with low forward.
Yeah, and speaking of low forwards, bro, like you think of low forward, you think of Karen. You think of Karen, you think of Big Hollywood RobTV, but you also think of Punk the God, who I suppose he's the best Karen player of all time, maybe the best Street Fighter player of all time. It's debatable. But I definitely remember a time when, look, Punk has an interesting quote. He says that he actually prefers there being more input lag when you play Street Fighter because of
I've heard that.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? Like he's the only person I've ever heard him say that. Because he feels like now everyone can react on PC or modern peripherals, but he feels like in the past when things are a little different and we have more input latency, only he could react. He could separate himself more. So that just goes to show how crazy his reactions are and what he's focused on in the game. But the reason I bring him up is because of the fact that Punk was, I had this conversation with dude back when I lived in Florida, man. Like he really opened people's eyes to what is possible reaction wise in this game. Remember, the big conversation was because of at that time there was 8 frames, I want to say, of input delay. Punk was still whiff punishing things that people thought you couldn't whiff punish.
It's not just whiff punish, it's hit confirms, right? So that's one thing I want to make clear about what you're bringing up with Punk. It wasn't just the whiff punishing, it was being able to consistently hit confirm low forward. No one knew that she could just kill you in one hit. Right?
She couldn't kill you in one hit, Brian.
Okay, I'm exaggerating, but you get what I'm saying. That any moment that low forward can be confirmed consistently. As in, you make a mistake, you will be whiff punished, and not only whiff punished, it will be confirmed. So he can both fish for it preemptively, so you walk away, you try to build space in neutral, he clips your toes and he confirms it consistently. Yeah. Or if you mess up your spacing, and against Karen, it's pretty difficult. She kind of outranges most characters.
Fast too.
It's fast. you get punished consistently. People were not hit confirming low forward like Punk consistently.
The whiff punishing, I still feel like that's a fact, but the whiff punishes was huge too, because he would like.
Right. No, I'm saying he changed the game. He changed the game.
Whiff punishes, like
he changed the game for Kara. Like people did not know that she was that monster in low forward range that you were in danger.
That changed people's perception of the whole game, though. Even like, whatever your character you play, I didn't know you could whiff punish in this game, like consistently, like this kid is doing. The game overall, V-shift being added, we got to bring that up too. The game overall has just shifted from the super high octane, high pace to.
But it's also not even mechanically. Like I would argue, it's not just any mechanics changing. It's our understanding of risk reward and how to play defensively, right? Like people know how to block better in this game and how to mitigate risk. The take the throw meme, right? Like people slowly over time learn how to play defense in this game, and I feel like that is the number one skill in Street Fighter V. And I think the offense and the defense are all stemming from that same understanding, because I think that's what Street Fighter V at its core is about. It's understanding risk reward and managing situations like that. So I think just beyond mechanics, we know better how to play the game.
So I think right now, like your most important skills, like you brought up right there, Brian, risk reward and defense. But when I say defense, it's another thing that me and Sanford was debating about on the highlight reel, right? Like he feels like the reason Adam, for example, is so much better or Punk and all these guys are so good is because of once they're put in these tough, like these, 50-50 guess situations, then they make the right read more often. Now, I'm not disputing that. However, the truth is, in my opinion, what makes a great Street Fighter V player is not being put in that position as much as your opponent. So the defense, most of defense in Street Fighter V is not what happens after you get knocked down or once you're in a corner. It's what happens when you're in the neutral game. How often do you dash check? How often do you anti-air? How often are you whiff punishing? So I think that defense and risk reward and strategy like that, defense in the neutral game is what makes a player great in Street Fighter V today.
Right. I agree. I mean, we'll keep it a buck. There's definitely situations where you're put into a bad spot in this game at the flip of a moment's notice,
V-trigger activation.
Certain V-trigger activations, but they cost resources. They're still a little bit situational. And then what you do from that point forward is your choice. And there's ways to mitigate risk reward for all those. So I think, to me, this game is 100% a study of risk reward management. I think the players who have mastered this game to a level that other people just have not caught up to yet. And I think that's what we see right now. That's why we see the game slow down so much. That's why we see people maintaining control. And that's why it's still explosive, but it's not, the fireworks aren't going off every round. We've come a long way since Mika doing a roll into plus frames into the vortex and keeping the pressure going.
Mid-screen Irish
right. Yeah, the Mika rounds are a lot more rare these days, I'd have to say.